So I wanted to bring Jim Berryhill up. So I mentioned him briefly. So Jim gave me my first job at CA back in 1998. And so, I have this vivid memory of the triangle. Does this make sense? The Jim Berryhill triangle. Everything that Jim ever equated to anything you were able to get it into a triangle. So just a little nugget there. So Jim is also a huge University of Florida fan. So I've seen him over the years. Rooting for the Gators for sure. So glad to have Jim here, and Jim wanted to share a couple things here as we wrap up. So
great, thanks, Gavin. Yeah, University of Florida fan, University of Georgia grad. Figured that one out. The most lame pre-lunch at a seminar thing you ever hear is "I'm the last thing between you and lunch." Well, I'm the last thing between you and bourbon. So that's not so bad. Thank you for being here. We're privileged to have sponsored this with TAG and the opportunity to participate. I hope this didn't sound like a Decision Link commercial. It's not. I like what Joanne said about building your personal brand. I've been in sales for a long time, and I believe that sales is an honorable profession. And way too much that is brought to the table about sales enablement isn't about sales enablement. It's about something for somebody else. We're about this notion of helping sales professionals in what I call, and I think John came up with it, but the democratization of value. And if every conversation between a buyer and a prospect, a buyer and a seller, ought to be about what's in it for the buyer. And Marcus, I think, said caveman. I always thought it was Marco Polo was the first value seller. Very simply, if I'm going to ask you for $1, I ought to be able to tell you what the $5 is that you're going to get out of it and why it matters to you. And that's what we call and think about the democratization of value. And it's not just value for all salespeople. It's value just permeate the engagement between sellers and buying organizations, products and marketing and so forth. We appreciate the opportunity and thank you, TAG again. And Casey Teague is the master distiller at a bourbon distillery here in Atlanta called Hellbenders. And I met Casey a couple of years ago at a function and so forth, and thought that we get somebody who knew what the heck they were talking about to host our bourbon tasting. So Casey, thanks for being here, and take it away.
Thanks for having me, everybody. I'm Casey Teague. Actually get paid to drink whiskey. It's a blurry job, but a good one. To tell you a little bit about me, I've opened restaurants. I opened a little restaurant years ago called Mac McGee in Decatur. It's their biggest whiskey bar in Atlanta. Also worked for Holman and Finch, restaurant Eugene, H&F Bottle Shop. I was their whiskey specialist for a few years. And then I decided to start my own company, which is called Liquid Culture, which is kind of what I do now. I had to consult on restaurants and different things. But I also have a distillery called Independent Distilling in downtown Decatur. Opening a distillery is not very profitable. So if you're thinking about opening a distillery, don't do it. Continue to drink like you are. So you gotta supplement your income a little bit. We opened the distillery about 4 years ago. We're actually gonna taste the bourbon that I brought this evening that we make. So you'll have an opportunity to taste that. But tonight we're gonna learn a little bit about whiskey. It's gonna be very bourbon focused. Bourbon's very hot right now. Who likes bourbon? Yes, me too. I only drink it on the days that end in Y. So just to make sure that I'm hydrated. I think what we're going to do is we're going to have everybody come in and get a whiskey. We have them all poured out in there for you. We have they're all going to be poured in Glencairn's glasses, so the glasses are going to be the first one. So if you guys want to go and grab one of those, then we'll bring everybody back out here. If you guys want to go and grab a whiskey in there, they're going to be in the Glencairn's glasses. I'll be in there to show you. They're going to look in glasses like this. Whiskey, to be a whiskey, so all distilled spirits have a specific thing that makes them what they are. So to be a whiskey, that means it is made from fermented and distilled grains. So anything that is made from fermented and distilled grains is a whiskey. So whiskey is the big category, right? And everything underneath whiskey is a subcategory, because we've all heard the saying that all bourbons are whiskeys, but not all whiskeys are bourbons, right? So whiskey is the big category, and everything underneath is a subcategory. Scotch whiskey, Irish whiskey, bourbon whiskey, wheat whiskey, rye whiskey, Canadian whiskey, Japanese whiskey, and the list goes on. Whiskey is the big category. So tonight we're going to drink bourbon, right? So to be a bourbon, it has to be made with at least 51% corn. So that's grains, right? That it has to be in there. So it has to be at least 51% corn. It has to be aged in newly charred white American oak barrels. And the barrel can only be used once. And they came up with this law. Somebody obviously had a brother in the barrel making business. It can't come off the still any higher than 160 proof, which is 80% alcohol by volume. Has anybody ever drank anything that's 80% alcohol by volume? No? You're lucky. It tastes terrible. It's hot, it burns, it doesn't taste good. And it can't go into the barrel any higher than 125 proof. Has to come from the United States of America. Bourbon is actually our national spirit. Everybody know that? So bourbon is something that is indigenous only to the United States of America. So every time you drink bourbon, you celebrate America. Just so you know. So we're going to talk about how whiskey's made, kind of through this whole process. Tell you a little bit about the first whiskey that we're going to drink. This is Larceny, where they were all out of the big bottles. So we had to get this little one. Larceny is a wheated bourbon. When we said that the bourbon is 51% corn, so this is at least 51% corn. When we say wheated bourbon, what that means is the next biggest grain component in our mash bill, or the grains that go in it, is wheat. Malted barley helps with our fermentation. The reason they don't put a lot of malted barley in there, can anybody guess? It's expensive. It's really what it is. It's really expensive. So they don't put a lot in there. Does everybody know how to taste whiskey? So, no, most people don't. Most people just knock it all the way back and they go, and then slam your hand down and go smooth. Whiskey drinkers are a little more sophisticated. Wine and beer, you can swirl it around. You can stick your nose in there, and when you taste and smell whiskey, you actually want to hold it underneath your mouth, and you breathe in your nose and your mouth at the same time. And it's going to give you a little tingle on your tongue. Some people call it a burn. I like to say tingle. It sounds better than burn. Right, we've all had wheat bread. It's kind of honey flavored and soft and delicate. So you're going to get a little bit of that in this. So first you're going to kind of get that corn, that vanilla kind of on the front. Then you get this nice kind of wheat flavor. Whiskey is a very simplistic process. The key to making good whiskey is to creating a great beer. So the first thing that distillers do is they pick their grains, like we were talking about. They pick the corn, the amount of corn they want to use. They pick the amount of wheat. We're also going to taste high rye bourbon today, so that means instead of wheat, we use rye. So they're going to pick those grains, and what they're going to do is they're going to cook them, just like a brewer would. What you're doing is you're cooking out the sugars and starches that naturally occur in corn, rye, or wheat, and malted barley. We were just a couple of small guys. We'd raised a little bit of capital, so we went knocking on doors in the city of Atlanta. They kept giving us the brewery license. We said, no, we don't. We're not going to make beer. We're going to make whiskey. And, after about 8 months of going back and forth, we did have one guy say, well, you could just open up. You don't need a license. We wanted to go with his recommendation, but luckily we did have a friend that was a lawyer and said, no, don't do that. Right now, where Decatur is, just a little east of the city. Very business friendly, very nice. We came up and said, hey, we want to open a distillery. They looked at us and said, okay, well, let's look at the laws. They opened up the books and they said, well, this law kind of says that you can't do that, but we could just scratch that out and you're good to go. I knew the mayor of Decatur and Michael did not, and so Michael was there and they were getting approval. Going down the line, everybody, yes, 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 and then the guy, Jim, who was the mayor at the time, sat there, shook his head, and Michael was thinking, oh my gosh, the mayor's not going to let us do this. The mayor who used to come to Mac McGee all the time in Decatur, that's how I knew him, he's a huge whiskey fan, finally raised his hand, and we were able to get into Decatur. And that was about 4.5 years ago. When we first started, we made corn whiskey. Is anybody here from the South and had drank corn whiskey? So we started making corn whiskey. Now, when you open a distillery, you need cash flow, right? So we put out a white whiskey. So we put out corn whiskey first, and then we decided, what about doing a rum? So we said, well, let's try it. We have a friend down in South Georgia named Eric Vonk. He makes Richland rum. So he grows his own sugarcane. That's part of it. Nobody else does that. So we were like, well, we can't really do that. So we decided to get a really high-grade molasses to make our rum. And rum is made from sugarcane. I actually drink more rum now than I drink whiskey. This is a pretty popular whiskey. This is kind of a classic. Like in the whiskey world, there's a lot of legends. This one is not exactly sure where the name came from. Or R.M. Rose was actually a whiskey that was produced here. As Prohibition started closing in on Rufus here in Georgia, he moved to Tennessee. And then in Tennessee, Prohibition started closing in on him there. And then he moved to Kentucky and then changed the name to Four Roses. Now, we can't confirm that. That's just one of the legends. And he proposed to this young woman and said, asked her to marry him. And she said, well, if at the cotillion or the ball, whatever you call it, tonight, if I just say yes, I will wear 4 roses on my dress. And that will give you my answer if it is yes. And so she wore 4 roses on her dress. And that's what he named his distillery after. That's way more romantic. 40 years later, a Japanese company called Kirin, they bought 4 Roses and brought 4 Roses back to the United States. To give you an idea what small batch is for 4 Roses, it's around 250 barrels is what that is. That's a small batch. Small batch for us at Independent Distilling, 2 barrels. All right, so the next one is the Henry McKenna. Henry McKenna was from Ireland. When he came, he actually brought his still with him. Eventually, he started making bourbon. He became very well known, and they kept his name alive, which they do. They keep a lot of old brands that had kind of disappeared, keep them going. Yeah, it comes from 1 barrel. Yeah, we're not adding anything into this. This is just 1 barrel. Bottle to bond means that it was made in 1 season at 1 distillery. It was aged in a government warehouse for a minimum of 4 years and a guarantee of 100 proof. If you put your whiskey in here and age it for 4 years, you don't have to pay taxes on it until you pull it out. And luckily for John E. Fitzgerald, that's what they were doing. He would go around and steal barrels from all these guys that were aging in these rickhouses. This is really cool. Single barrel whiskeys are going to be different every time because when we're aging whiskey, like I said, we were talking about distillation. What happens after distillation is we put it into a barrel. And then when we're aging in the barrel, that's when a lot of the magic happens. That's where we get 100% of our color and about 60% of our flavor. So with this one, you're going to get a lot of oak, a lot of vanilla. It's a little bit older. It's also 100 proof, so you get a little bit more alcohol. And they're always going to be different unless you get the same barrel number and batch number. So thanks for having me. If you guys have any questions, I'll be around. We can talk a little bit more. Come visit us at Independent Distilling.
So we're going to have Casey draw a ticket. So get your... Everybody got their tickets out?
I got the tickets.
Casey, go ahead and draw one.
Am I in this one too?
I don't know.
All right.
Jake, what we got there? What's the door prize?
Happy Van Winkle, Family Reserve, 15 years.
All right. What's the number, Casey? Decision Link employees are not eligible. I don't care if you got a ticket or not. All right. I'm sure about that. Decision Link customers are, but not employees. Go ahead.
All right. 5, 3, 7, 4, 2, 4, 0.